If you thought you already knew everything about this game, then there's 3 advanced strategies which are often overlooked by the player base and will give you an advantage in Genshin Impact. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by The Walking Dead Survivors, a new strategy survival mobile game that features fan-favorite characters from the comic books and gives it the chance to fight with them together in the harsh world full of walkers. Build your camp and send out a radio signal to find and recruit over 80 different characters, all of which have their own unique skills and abilities, like the hot-tempered Shane, who's the only one that can use the Molotov cocktail and set the walkers on fire. And it's all about managing these survivors and their unique skills, so giving them tasks to build your community or sending them out on exploration missions for precious resources will be your responsibility as the camp leader to make these tough choices. And with the never-ending threat of walker hordes trying to destroy your camp, you'll need to build your defenses. But it's not just walkers you'll need to worry about, because Negan and his saviors are here to cause real trouble. So you'll want to join a clan to expand your camp's territory and rely on your clan allies. And you can play the game right now by clicking on the download link below the video, and by doing so, you'll be supporting the channel, so make sure to check out The Walking Dead Survivors today. If you've been playing Genshin for a while now, you've probably noticed that there's something going on with elemental statuses and the way some reactions give unexpected results. Well, as it turns out, this little icon above the enemy's head has a lot of information hidden behind it, and in fact, the uniqueness of this status will depend on the character who applied it. And this is what's known as an elemental gauge, which is a common term Genshin theory crafters use to describe the hidden timer of the elemental status. And before you fall asleep on this academical lesson, just understand that if you become aware of this, a whole world of possibilities and gameplay mechanics will open up for you. For example, did you know that you can actually squeeze in 3 melt reactions from a single pyro status when using Bennett, Kaya, and Rosaria? That's because when Bennett does his fire slash by pressing the skill button, if you immediately switch to Rosaria to do her own skill, and then follow it right after with Kaya's skill, the results are going to speak for themselves as you're looking at right now. And this is why every skill, burst, and anything else that can produce an elemental status has a hidden timer that can be calculated and even manipulated to your own advantage. And the reason it's based on time would be because when you apply any other status on top of it to cause a reaction, you're basically subtracting from its original status timer. And while the calculations behind it are outside the scope of this video, just know that some character abilities can produce very long status timers, and thus you can take advantage of them. And as you just saw, besides literal time affecting the elemental gauge itself, any character talent will also decrease it by some seconds, depending on few factors like the type of reaction and skill or burst you're using. Bear in mind, this is an extremely simplified version of what's happening behind the scenes, but the main takeaway here is that even without understanding the inner workings of this, in all honesty, overcomplicated system, you can still use the opportunity to understand and respect the existing solution for elemental reactions. So if you think about it, this is why Ganyu's fully charged shot can trigger double melt reaction with some of the pyro character abilities, and it's the same reason why you can trigger more than one reaction even if the game tutorials make you believe otherwise. So in essence, the elemental gauge is a very complex topic that's not going to matter for most people who simply enjoy the game as it is, but if you're interested in learning about the inner workings and how all of this can be achieved by preparing in advance, you can check out the link in the description for several good recommendations. But for those of you who are watching this and scratching their heads already, know this: each elemental status you produce has a hidden timer that's also called an elemental gauge, and it's best to use your character abilities for reactions as soon as you apply the original status, because the longer you delay, the more chances you can end up in a situation like Chongyun with Bennett, where even after 5 seconds of the pyro status existing on the enemy from Bennett's burst, when Chongyun does his burst, only 2 of the cryo attacks will result in melt. So in other words, keep a close eye on the status and the way your character interacts with it, or use the resources provided in the description to learn more about this advanced topic. One thing that has been around since the game's launch is something that could potentially reduce your damage significantly if you're not aware of how this hidden mechanic works. And it's called snapshotting, where the buffs you receive will not affect your currently deployed skills, such as Fischl's Raven, Xiangling's Pyronado, or Zhongli's Pillars, and so on. Actually, nearly 70% or 23 characters in the game have some form of deployable skills that can get affected by this hidden mechanic. Still, the way it works is quite simple. If you ever deploy something and then either gain a positive or negative increase to your stats, that deployed skill or burst will stay unaffected and keep producing the same amount of damage. And the most classical example would would be Bennett's burst, so if Xiangling's Pyronado is out and you switch to Bennett and punch the ground, that Pyronado will still keep doing the same amount of damage, even if you were supposed to get Benny Boy's damage buff. Instead, for the increased damage, you need to do Bennett's burst first as your opener, and then use any other character like Xiangling with a follow-up Pyronado. And this is why it's called snapshotting, because it's like taking a picture of the current stats your character has right before the skill or burst gets deployed, and anything else during the period that would try to boost it or lower it will simply have no effect on it. But without trying to bore you with too many details, there's a couple of caveats you need to know, and one of them involves Xingqiu, who is actually one of the few characters that are not affected with snapshotting when it comes to his burst, so anything that tries to increase or lower the damage of his Hydro Swords will affect the damage output in real time. And it's really annoying if you think about it, but in order to make things easier for yourself, just imagine anytime any skill or burst that's going to stay on the battlefield, just make sure to apply all the damage increase you're about to do before unleashing your deployable skills. And some of the examples include the Archaic Petra and Noblesse Oblige artifact sets, or even the Wolf's Gravestone passive, which gives a pretty massive attack boost, but if you land it when your skills are deployed, they won't get that extra attack benefit. Still, if we can take a picture of our stats and use them throughout the whole duration, this also means you can do some very cool manipulation of this mechanic. For example, the Tenacity of Millilith has a very short 3-second window of benefits it provides each time you land an elemental skill with the equipped character, and on first impression, you would obviously think it's tailor-made for Zhongli only, but now that you understand how snapshotting works, this means anything you can squeeze into those 3 seconds, be it Xiangling's burst or Fischl's Raven, they will still use the stats that they were deployed with long after the buff is gone. And you can easily see for yourself by using someone like Diona, and then quickly switch to one of the characters to get the buff applied for the whole duration if they manage to deploy one of their skills. So in short, snapshotting is something you need to be aware of whenever you're trying to take advantage of anything that can boost your stats, but it's only going to be important for the skills that stay on the battlefield or have a delayed activation. So make sure when you're using your team, always put anything that provides positive effects as your first priority before deploying any other skills that are going to stay on the battlefield, or else, if you do get the positive benefits, you will need to redeploy to have their damage increased. There's no denying that primogems can be both a source of happiness and suffering for many players, especially when it comes to those big wishing sessions when you've got a massive stockpile of gems just sitting there for that next character you're excited to get. And we all know at this point there's a pity system that guarantees you a 5-star or even a 4-star appearance within a set number of wishes, but when it comes to actually figuring out your odds of obtaining a more focused outcome is not so clear, especially when you have featured characters or weapons on a banner. And as of making this video, Yanfei is one of the 3 featured 4-stars that all have a boosted appearance rate, and even after you carefully bother to read the rules of probability MiHoYo discloses on their banners, one thing you won't see is the actual chance between the 3 featured 4-stars themselves, which we have to assume at this point is basically 1/3 or 33.3% chance of being one of the characters you'll see. But the problem of this whole design of having an additional randomization results in players not understanding their odds completely, and leads to the well-known gambler's fallacy, where a person believes that if something random happens too many times in a row, their chances increase for a different outcome, when in fact, that is completely untrue because randomness does not depend on anything except pure luck. Point is, at least when you're saving up for a 5-star character, you have far more control over your odds because there's a pity counter that will either end up giving you the featured character, or if that's not the case, then you know it's a guaranteed pity pool next time. However, in the case of featured 4-star characters and even 5-star weapons, even if they have boosted rates, you are never guaranteed to know which of the outcomes to expect because these characters and weapons share their featured spots between each other, which means there's an additional randomization involved. So the next time you have the urge to summon, first of all, only consider if you're able to financially do this, especially if you're spending money in the game, and then exercise caution with probability when it comes to featured 4-star characters and 5-star weapons. But to quickly summarize, the elemental statuses you produce on enemies are all unique and depend on which character ability you used, but the most important thing to understand about these statuses would be the hidden timer that's also called an elemental gauge, which can be manipulated by using more than one reaction if you're quick enough with rotating character abilities. Then there's snapshotting, and the nature of it basically lies in the name itself, where any skill that can be deployed on the battlefield will use the stats for the whole period of its duration during the time it gets deployed, which means you will want to first activate any buffs before deploying your skills. Finally, the probability of wishes has shown us that outside the featured 5-star characters, everything else is pretty much out of your control and can result from very quick to very disastrous wishing sessions if you're looking for a particular 4-star character or 5-star weapon. It's funny when you think about it, these things shown in the video have existed since the game had launched, but because some of the recent changes from the updates and the general maturity of the player base, it's probably the time even for the most casual of players to get more comfortable knowing that Genshin isn't just a game that's about misery of artifact farming and endless dopamine rush of wishing. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel by enabling the bell notifications on, and don't forget to gently press the like button. Thanks for watching till the end, and see you in the next video.